Warriors had little chance against Cornwallis, the Americans did have some key advantages. The 1st Pennsylvania Regiment were excellent marksmen using rifles. While they took longer to load, they were much more accurate. This changed the nature of warfare.
The rifle was the new weapon of the Revolution. The British didn't have them. It really came from German gunsmiths in Lancaster, PA. Erroneously, they're called Kentucky rifles mostly now, but they're Pennsylvania rifles.
Good, experienced riflemen from western New York, western Pennsylvania, western Virginia can load and fire a rifle twice a minute. But every time they fire it, that rifle ball goes exactly where they want it to, up to perhaps 300 yards.
Their marksmanship was better. Their long-distance marksmanship seemed to be superior to the British Army, and their tactics quickly were superior. The British apparently standing out in the open in massed formation, as you say, European tactics, and the Pennsylvania riflemen off in the woods or hiding behind things, sniping at them and then retreating and then sniping again.
At that time, distance was crucial, especially if you're not fighting in the standard European style, but fighting American style, meaning from behind trees, from behind bushes, from behind rocks, from behind houses.
Fighting in formation, though, with rifles was something totally new, where you could have an entire regiment of men. How do you hide a regiment of men to fire from cover? Well, they lay in high grass, they got into dense brush, they wore clothes that were basically invisible.
Which means you've got this balance between extreme marksmen, who as the British approach can start picking them off at a distance far greater than they can respond with the British muskets, and you've got regular infantry who can deal with a straight-on, head-on attack. Perfect balance between the Pennsylvania Regiment and Scott's 5th Virginia.
Colonel Hand and his Pennsylvania riflemen were about to engage a superior force with superior firepower and one of the best tacticians the British Army had in the field. Washington had a plan, but he needed it executed flawlessly.
He gets together with Knox and Lord Stirling and Greene and all the best of his really smart, trusted men, and they work out a battle plan. And that battle plan becomes the battle that we know as either the Second Battle of Trenton or the Battle of the Assunpink.
The Second Battle of Trenton is good theater. Basically, it's pretense. It's pretending to have a large army, digging away, digging in to go on fighting, while leaving a skeleton force behind and using skirmishers. Colonel Hand and his men, you're only talking about a few hundred men, backing up slowly, 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 and using sniper fire to disorganize the British Army.
Even the fact that Hand's force was small presented a distinct and decisive advantage: mobility.
The weather favors the Americans. It's unseasonably warm. This is a good thing. The road is muddy. It's hard to march in mud. It's hard to pull cannons through mud. They're slowed down. The Americans fighting American style are behind trees, behind bushes, behind rocks, behind hills.
And so the stage was set. Hand's orders were to delay the British from reaching Washington. His unit would have to be fleet of foot, quick to load, and deadly with their aim.
Now, about 2 miles below the town of Maidenhead is a small body of water called the 5 Mile Run. This is where the first portion of the infantry screen has been posted. They have no intention of staying there. It's not a good defensive position. It's not a terrible defensive position, but it doesn't have all the elements necessary for a good defensive position. So as the Crown forces come up, they open fire, they slow the Crown forces down, the Crown forces come to a halt, they bring more soldiers to the front, they attack again, and this time the force at the 5 Mile Run pulls back, retreats back southward on the road to Trenton, a distance of about 2 miles to the Shabakunk Creek.
Here, a much larger skirmish, almost a full battle, takes place. Washington and Greene, according to reports, actually ride out from Trenton to tell Hand, what you're doing is wonderful, continue the delaying tactics.
Well, the hand on the clock is moving. This whole thing started maybe around 12 o'clock or 12:30 p.m. Now it's up to maybe 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the afternoon. And this goes on, and around 3-ish, finally the British have brought a huge force up. They attack, and Hand starts to pull his forces back heavily. Lets them have possession of the Shabbaconk Creek.
From there, they fall back again to an area called Stockton Hollow. A third skirmish takes place, again delaying. By now, it is late in the afternoon. Hand and his riflemen fall back even more.
These men are exhausted. They have been fighting for hours and hours and hours. They have been awake for we don't know exactly how long, but for a very long time. And they're really, really exhausted. Well, as they approach the town of Trenton, out of the streets of Trenton bursts Colonel Hitchcock's Rhode Island Regiment. They've been sent out to relieve Hand. They form up line of battle, start volleying at the British, open their lines enough so that Hand's troops can pass between them. This gives Hand an opportunity to move to the south side of town and to cross the bridge over the Assunpink Creek over onto Mill Hill.
Washington's troops were positioned between the Assunpink Creek and the Delaware River. His best defense was nightfall, when fighting stopped. Had Colonel Hand's infantry screen failed, Washington would have been crushed as the Delaware River left him no retreat.
Washington has entrenched his soldiers on the side of that hill in 3 parallel lines, lower, center, and upper. And they're sufficiently far apart that they can safely fire over each other. In other words, all 3 of those lines can fire at exactly the same time. Further, he has brought his artillery, at least 30 cannons, and placed them on the south side of the bridge. To cross that bridge, you have to brave his cannons and the fire of his cannons and the infantry. It must have been a gosh awful thing to look at. It's terribly important that this thing happen exactly the way it happens. Washington has put all of his eggs in one basket, and that's the south side of the Assunpink. The Assunpink flows into the Delaware at a sharp angle. That's where Washington is in that angle. He's got no way out. There's only one area, and if the British ever come in from that side, from the easterly side, he is totally trapped and his army's going to be massacred. He has risked everything on one roll of the dice, this defensive battle of the Assunpink.
Against seemingly overwhelming odds, Colonel Hand successfully held off Cornwallis until late afternoon. Although they accomplished their mission, the fighting was not over yet. With daylight fading fast, the Second Battle of Trenton was about to begin.
So the first assault begins, and as soon as the attacking British force gets maybe halfway across the bridge, all of the cannons fire at once. The roar must have been staggering, absolutely staggering. In this battle, it is the greatest use of artillery in the Western Hemisphere up to this point in history. The infantry opens up. The Crown forces make it just barely to the other side of the bridge before those volleys of musketry just crush them back. They're forced to fall back. They reorganize and try it again. They attack. The artillery's waiting for them. They're loaded. They get about halfway across. The artillery opens up in one huge volley, and they never get any further. They fall back, assemble again. They're losing their spirit. The officers are having to beat the men with the flats of their swords to get them to participate in this insane suicidal assault on the bridge. They try it one more time, same thing. The artillery is all set, opens fire on them. They barely get on the bridge. That's the end of it. It has finally gotten so dark they can't do this any longer.
There are many casualties on both sides. Reports are that the bridge was red with redcoats lying there, red with blood.
As night fell over the Assunpink Creek, Cornwallis decided to halt action until morning.
Cornwallis decides it's too late, it's too dark. He says to his officers, "I'll bag the Fox," meaning Washington, in the morning. One of his officers supposedly says to him, if Washington is the man we think he is, he won't be there in the morning. And Cornwallis supposedly replied, "But where can he go?"
The entire British force, which was doing the usual thing, fight in the daytime, cook, sleep, rest up for the next day.
Defying rules of conventional warfare, Using Cornwallis's years of experience and battle expectations against him, General Washington then delivers his masterstroke.
Washington didn't even tell most of his officers what he was going to do.
He does not want to get caught in a battle with Cornwallis again the following day, where he can be trapped between the Assunpink and the Delaware and just destroyed. He's taking his troops out of there.
And he knew by throwing extra cedar that was not cured onto wood fires, it made an awful lot of smoke. So the British on their side of the Assunpink Creek could not see what was going on. They were using just their ears, and they heard the shovels banging away at the soil.
And through the course of the night, you can see some of Washington's soldiers moving back and forth, silhouetted against these bonfires. It's a trick.
Washington, meanwhile, has ordered that his cannon wheels be wrapped in cloth to muffle the sound as they are rolled away over the frozen ground.
So with these bonfires burning up there, they blind people who are looking at them. They can't see what's going on past those bonfires because they've been blinded by that light. Washington gets away with it. He moves over to the other side of the Mill Hill, travels 4.5 miles upstream on the Assunpink on the south bank, to a place where he knows there's a ford. They can cross the river without a bridge. Washington
even fooled some of his own men, because the pickets, the outposts, the officers there were not let in on the secret in case they were captured and interrogated by the British.
He crosses at that ford and heads up towards Princeton to attack the British force the following day, January the 3rd, at Princeton and rout them. That's the Battle of Princeton.
After their victory at Princeton, Washington and the reinvigorated Continental Army began preparing winter quarters. For now, the fighting would subside, but historians agree that if Colonel Hand had failed to delay Cornwallis and his army, the American battle for independence would have been lost.
Washington might have been able to retreat to the south. He could not get across the Delaware. Someone described the ice floes in the Delaware at this point as the size of a house. There was no way he could get across. We would probably have been trapped in New Jersey. It might have dragged on for a little while, but the war for independence would have been a failure.
And had the British arrived in Trenton earlier, the Americans were outnumbered. The Patriots were outnumbered. If the British had arrived earlier, they might have wiped out what was left of the American army, taken prisoners. That would have been the end of this revolution, and it would have been a small footnote in British history, and the colonies would have stayed British.
What Colonel Hand did here may have been decisive for the outcome of the American Revolution. If it weren't for his rearguard action, Washington's army probably would have been crushed on January 2nd, 1777.
The delaying tactics of January 2nd, 1777 were carried out brilliantly by Colonel Edward Hand. Following Washington's famous victories at the battles of Trenton and Princeton, this story has been largely forgotten. But as history shows, Colonel Hand and his riflemen were much more than a footnote in the American Revolution.